All right, for more on the closure of the Spaza shop registration window, we're joined by township retail specialist and the director of Vusi Catalyst, Vusi Vokwana. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, we've just listened to some calls being made for an extension to be granted just as the 21-day deadline comes to a close. What are your thoughts around that?
Good evening and good evening to the viewers. Well, I think it's very clear that in certain provinces, we've got some spatial planning legacies, like they've referred to the title deeds, to the zoning issues that are making a deadline extension critical for the process to continue. But in the province that I operate in the Western Cape, City of Cape Town hasn't requested our members to apply for zoning or any kind of title deed application or any process that looks at the spatial planning. So we're not facing these challenges here. The only thing that we're seeing in the Western Cape is extremely long lines and possibly the city's inability to then cope with the demand.
Why is it that you think that you haven't been asked to, move to the next tier of the registration process as opposed to those who are operating in provinces like Gauteng?
Well, in the Western Cape, the majority of the Spaza shops already fall within areas that are demarcated for operating as businesses. And I think we've been very lucky in the historical townships of the Western Cape that this has been something that we fought for at least 20 years ago. We started the process to encourage the city to change the way that our properties and our businesses are zoned in order to facilitate a conducive environment for businesses to operate in.
As you make reference to the long queues that have been witnessed during this period, do you think at all that there has been a lack of understanding on filling out the documents as what has been experienced and articulated in Gauteng?
Absolutely. There's very rarely a time that consumers or even, everyday citizens have to interact with government where the documentation process isn't onerous, isn't difficult to understand, doesn't require an intermediary to interpret. So this is not a new situation. This is constantly where we find ourselves every time we have to interact with any government office or any government documentation.
Listening to MEC Lebogang Maile, he spoke about, how some considerations will be made based on the number of people who have responded in terms of wanting to have an extension granted. And he's also spoken quite a great deal about wanting to also ensure that they know who owns the Spaza shops, which is an important aspect. In terms of ownership ratio in the Western Cape, what would you say, who would you say is owning the Spaza shops? Because in Gauteng, for one, there's a lot of foreign nationals who are in ownership. Would you say that's the case in the Western Cape?
That's the case in the country. We've got an overwhelming majority, at least 85% of Spaza shops in South Africa are currently owned and operated by foreign nationals.
And as director of Vusi Catalyst, what is your mandate? What would you like to see happen in terms of developing young South Africans and working to try and find your space, your place within this Spaza shop business model?
So I think, government is looking at Spazas today, and this is a fight between the big giants, the big corporates, and the foreign nationals who have already kicked us as local township entrepreneurs out of that space a long time ago, because we have no access to the capital requirements that are needed for us to achieve economies of scales in that market. So for me, if I could imagine a future where young South Africans have access to capital, I wouldn't be sending them into running Spaza shops. Mm-hmm. I would be getting them to look at, further up the food chain, either getting into being the intermediary between the supplier and the Spazas, or owning the properties where the Spazas operate from, as landlords, But I think the daily operations of a Spaza shop in today's economy in South Africa is very demanding on you as a person, and the majority of the young people that we have today shouldn't be in Spaza shops. These are the kinds of businesses that we were running, 20 years ago as a response to an exclusive environment that was created by the apartheid regime. But today, those are not the businesses that our children should be going into. We should be encouraging them to find less, physically demanding jobs and running businesses that are more technologically driven and using the data insights that we've gleaned over the years to then speak to responding to consumer insights and using what's available in the global market for them. I don't see the future being in Spaza shops, especially not for young people. And I think we need to be thinking as Black South Africans, how do we participate in the economy in a way that doesn't require us to be standing all day and selling and making minimal profit? Let's have a bigger picture and a bigger dream for young entrepreneurs in townships specifically.
If that is your view, how then do you think that entrepreneurs can be capacitated to be part of this Spaza shop ecosystem?
Well, further up the supply chain, there's bigger value that they can have. There's the big logistics market. We've got a lot of delivery companies that don't even come into townships. And the fact that we've got these big global partners coming in. So you've got ShopRite with its big, funds and access to large supply chains and direct access to the suppliers themselves, which means that they can bring in things cheaper. Then you've got the foreign nationals who are also coming in with big pockets, and they're renting out spaces in townships for the whole year in advance. They're making renovations. We can see how they circumvent the water and electricity provided by municipalities. So there is a problem that we can't address as local entrepreneurs in this space. And these guys are able to do it. And whether they're doing it illegally or legally, the bottom line is that they're exposing a problem that we have in our society that we as locals have been unable to solve or to even get government to look at. Mm-hmm. So there's a role that they need to play in the disruption because they've got the capacity and the financing to do so. But in terms of where do we play as local South Africans? Well, there's community trusts that could be set up in each township so that no matter what business is being run within our communities where we are spending our money, we're able to benefit from them directly and not having to wait for either ESD or some other annual benefit, and rather getting it up front. We can think about getting involved in the supply chains, like I expressed earlier. Mm-hmm. There's also opportunities for young people to actually be property owners, because as much as there are no title deeds currently in most townships, this is an opportunity for municipalities to then make title deeds available, which means somebody who's a local can own those properties and then have tenants who are then Spaza shops. So there are so many opportunities that become available in this space. Even now, when we're looking at this licensing, we know that this is a health issue. Mm-hmm. So they're going to need health inspectors. There are roles that we can play as township residents where people can be incentivized and paid to then help government to then inspect these existing stores to make sure that some of the deaths that have happened don't continue to happen in our spaces, in our communities. We just need to look at it differently.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on the discussion. A different take there as we're joined and round up that conversation by township retail specialist and the director of Gasi Catalyst, Vusi Vokwana.